Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of This Week in Gaming. This week, Bethesda has given us a clear picture of what the future looks like for the Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and Starfield, including some announcements fans have been waiting years to hear. Meanwhile, former Dragon Age lead writer David Gaider has raised some serious questions about whether the franchise still has a future under EA. Xbox is reportedly testing a new disc-to-digital feature that could change how physical games carry forward into a digital future, while PlayStation is facing yet another fight over physical media. So let's go ahead and jump into Bethesda's reveal. Bethesda Game Studios has finally outlined the future of the Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and Starfield. While there's some genuinely exciting announcements here, this is much more of a roadmap than it is a release calendar. Now, on July 17th, Todd Howard confirmed that the Elder Scrolls 6 is now Bethesda's primary development focus, with the majority of the studio now working on it. Bethesda says the game is playable internally and progressing as planned, but there is still no gameplay, release window, or confirmed platform lineup. So after announcing the game all the way back in 2018, Bethesda is finally giving us a little more than, yes, it still exists. But the larger surprise came from Fallout. Fallout 5 is officially in pre-production. Although Howard describes it as Bethesda's long-range destination, in other words, it is happening, but nobody should expect it playing it anytime soon. Bethesda's planning to fill that wait with several other projects. We've got remasters of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas that are officially in development. Although Bethesda did not announce release dates, platforms, or how extensive these remasters will be. But even more significantly, Obsidian Entertainment, the developer behind Fallout New Vegas, is going to be working on another game within the Fallout universe. And before we get carried away, Bethesda did not announce New Vegas 2. We do not have a title, setting, or release window. Nothing but Obsidian officially returning to Fallout. That's it. It's still a pretty big deal after years of fans asking whether it would ever happen. Bethesda also confirmed that it is not abandoning Starfield. The studio says it will continue expanding the game with new stories, gameplay improvements, and additional updates as it enters its third year. Taken together, the message seems to be that Bethesda wants these franchises developing alongside one another instead of forcing each one to wait until the previous game is completely finished. That sounds promising, especially considering how enormous the waits between Bethesda RPGs have become. But there is also reason to remain cautious. Most of these projects have no dates, no gameplay, and very few concrete details. This announcement also arrives shortly after major layoffs affected Xbox. ZeniMax, Bethesda, and Obsidian employees making this roadmap feel partly like reassurance that the company's biggest franchises still have a future. So on paper, Bethesda's RPG future looks strong. The Elder Scrolls 6 is finally the main focus, Fallout is expanding through remasters, Obsidian and eventually Fallout 5, and Starfield is continuing rather than being quietly left behind. These announcements are exciting, but now Bethesda has to prove whether it can deliver them without making players wait for another decade. And speaking of back from the dead, we're going to be asking ourselves, is it dead? With our next segment about Dragon Age. Is Dragon Age dead? That's the question being asked after former Dragon Age lead writer David Gaider gave a pretty bleak assessment of the franchise's future under EA. In a recent interview with PC Gamer, Gaider was asked whether he believes Dragon Age has a future, and specifically when it comes to EA. His answer was unlikely. Gaider says that during his time at BioWare, Dragon Age was regularly in danger of being shelved, but each new game would perform better than EA expected. According to him, the publisher never seemed to have the same confidence in Dragon Age that it did in Mass Effect. And now, for the first time, the franchise has released a major game that fell significantly short of EA's expectations. In January of 2025, EA reported that Dragon Age The Veilguard had reached approximately 1.5 million players during its launch quarter, nearly 50% below what the company expected. And just to be precise here, EA said players engaged. not that 1.5 million copies sold. Those are not necessarily the same number. After the Veilguard released, BioWare shifted its attention toward the next Mass Effect. The studio later said that a core team was developing that game while BioWare itself became what it described as a smaller, more agile and focused studio. Right now, there is no new Dragon Age game officially announced, but that doesn't mean EA has officially killed the franchise. Now, David Gaider no longer works for BioWare. He left the studio back in 2016, so his comments shouldn't be treated as an announcement from EA or BioWare. But what makes his perspective interesting is that this is somebody who helped shape Dragon Age from the beginning. He spent years watching the relationship between the franchise, BioWare, and EA from the inside. And apparently, he has not completely closed the door on returning either. Gaider says that if some unlikely situation resulted in Dragon Age being handed back to him, he would be interested in the challenge of bringing it back to what originally appealed to players, taking the series somewhere darker, more dangerous, and potentially more willing to upset people. Honestly, I think the most accurate answer right now is that the Dragon Age is not officially dead, but it might be dormant for a very, very long time. EA owns the franchise. BioWare's current focus is Mass Effect. The Veilguard missed EA's expectations, and there's currently no announced follow-up. So the question may not be whether we ever see Dragon Age again. The bigger question is whether EA still believes Dragon Age is worth investing in. And if it does return one day, whether the BioWare that eventually makes it will even resemble the studio that created the series in the first place, we'll have to see. Now, in the last episode, we talked about PlayStation's decision to stop producing physical discs for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles beginning in January 2028. And at the time, most of the conversation revolved around the immediate backlash from the loss of physical ownership and what an all-digital PlayStation could mean for preservation. But this week, that backlash has started becoming something more substantial. Now, in the Netherlands, consumer organization Stichting Maatschappij en Consument says Sony's decision strengthens its existing €400 million lawsuit against the company. Now, to be clear, this lawsuit wasn't created specifically because PlayStation is ending physical games. It challenges the 30% commission Sony reportedly receives from games sold through the PlayStation Store, and argues that PlayStation users are paying higher prices because Sony controls the console's digital marketplace. But according to the organization, eliminating discs would also eliminate the last meaningful alternative to that marketplace. There would be no physical retailers competing on price, no used game market, and nowhere else for PlayStation owners to purchase new games outside of Sony's ecosystem. And that concern is now being raised in Mexico as well. Federal Representative Reyes and Senator Luis Donaldo Colosio have announced plans to submit an antitrust complaint asking Mexican regulators to investigate whether Sony's decision could be anti-competitive. Now, this is only a proposed complaint. Sony has not been found guilty of anything, and regulators have not ruled that ending physical games violates Mexican law. But the concern is that once physical releases disappear, Sony would control the hardware, the storefront, the distribution, and ultimately, the only marketplace where new PlayStation games could be purchased. The lawmaker also raised another important issue. An all-digital system assumes every player has reliable high-speed internet. That isn't necessarily true in Mexico, and honestly, it isn't true everywhere in the US either. Retailers are beginning to push back as well. The UK's Entertainment Retailers Association says 45% of all physical games sold in the United Kingdom during 2025 were PlayStation games. The total UK disc-based market was reportedly worth more than £300 million, and 25% of gamers under 25 still use discs. So despite the argument that physical games are becoming irrelevant, there is clearly still a substantial market for them. Digital gaming is absolutely popular, and I understand why companies want to invest in it. But digital games can exist alongside physical games. they don't have to replace them completely. Unfortunately, some of this backlash is also being directed at entirely the wrong people. When indie developer Eat Pant Games had its launch trailer for Tito uploaded to the official PlayStation YouTube channel, the studio was initially excited to see hundreds of comments underneath it. Then they discovered most of those comments had nothing to do with their game. People were using the trailer to protest Sony's physical media decision, and the same thing has reportedly been happening underneath several other trailers uploaded by PlayStation. Now, I understand why players are angry, and believe me, I'm angry too. But flooding an independent developer's launch trailer with comments about physical games doesn't hurt the executives who made this decision. It hurts the developers who spent years creating that game and were probably hoping people would finally talk about it. I guarantee you, Sony didn't send an email to every developer underneath their banner saying, "Hey guys, we're thinking about ending physical games. What do you guys think? Yay or nay?" Now those developers had absolutely no say in this. And if people want to continue putting pressure on Sony, direct that pressure towards Sony, not the developers who are simply releasing games on its platform. Personally, the biggest issue for me is the ownership. Now, Sony has already shown us exactly how fragile digital purchases can be. The company recently notified PlayStation customers in the UK that beginning September 1st, they will lose access to 551 previously purchased movies and TV titles because of expiring licensing agreements. Now, these aren't movies people were accessing through a temporary subscription. They were sold as digital purchases, and no refund or compensation has been announced for the affected customers. Now that involves movies rather than games, but it demonstrates the exact problem. When you purchase something digitally, you may be paying full price, but what you actually receive is a license that can potentially disappear because of a decision made by a company or its rights holder. And if physical games completely disappear, players lose the only version that can't be remotely taken away because a licensing agreement changed. Every company seems increasingly focused on figuring out where its next dollar is coming from, even when the average consumer gets screwed in the process. And that's why I'm hopeful these lawsuits, regulatory complaints, retailers, and players can convince Sony to reconsider, or at least restructure what this digital-only future is supposed to look like. Because if PlayStation moves forward without offering some meaningful form of permanent ownership, I will not be purchasing another PlayStation console. And I'm curious where everyone else stands. Would you still buy another PlayStation if every new game were digital only? And do you believe paying full price for a digital game should guarantee permanent access to it? Because an almost perfect reversal of gaming history, while PlayStation is facing legal and consumer pressure for moving away from discs, Xbox may be developing a system designed to keep physical purchases alive on digital hardware. And if that sounds like Xbox just pulled a 2013 PlayStation, let's talk about disc to digital. Xbox may have found an interesting way to bring physical game libraries into an increasingly digital future. Now, according to reporting from The Verge, Microsoft is internally testing a feature called Disc to Digital that would allow players to essentially convert supported physical Xbox games into digital entitlements connected to their Microsoft account. And the way this reportedly works is surprisingly simple. You insert a compatible Xbox One or Xbox Series X game, install, and play it. Your account receives access to the digital version of the game. The important part is that you are not creating a second copy that you can keep forever while selling the disc. The digital entitlement remains connected to that specific physical copy. If you were to sell the game or give the disc to somebody else who activates it on their account, the digital access moves with the disc. So at least based on what Microsoft is reportedly testing, the physical game still represents your ownership. You just gain more ways to access it. Now, that could potentially mean playing the game without constantly swapping discs, streaming supported titles through Xbox Cloud Gaming, or accessing Xbox Play Anywhere games on compatible PCs and handhelds. There are limitations, the system reportedly only supports Xbox One and Xbox Series era discs, not original Xbox or Xbox 360 games. And Microsoft has apparently warned testers that some older Xbox One discs may not be compatible because of how they were manufactured. And right now, this is still an internally tested feature. Microsoft has not officially announced the release date or even guaranteed that disc to digital will launch publicly. But I think the larger idea here is really interesting. We've spent a lot of time talking about the gaming industry's shift toward digital distribution and what that means for people who've spent years building physical collections. If console manufacturers eventually stop including disc drives, those players should not have to simply abandon everything they already have. Something like disc to digital could offer a bridge between those two worlds. You buy and keep the physical copy, but you also gain some of the convenience that normally comes with buying digitally. There are still major questions about long-term ownership, authentication, what happens if Microsoft eventually shuts the services down, whether this system is ultimately preparing players for a future Xbox without a disc drive. Microsoft reportedly has not yet finalized whether its next generation Xbox will include one. So I'm not ready to call disc to digital the solution to physical game preservation, but compared to simply telling players your old discs won't work anymore, this at least sounds like an attempt to bring existing physical libraries forward. And as gaming moves further toward an all-digital future, that distinction could become extremely important. So veteran game developer Glen Schofield has announced that he is retiring from the day-to-day work of making games after his 35-year career. Schofield is best known as the creator of Dead Space, but he also co-founded Sledgehammer Games, where he worked on several major Call of Duty titles. More recently, he founded Striking Distance Studios and directed the Callisto Protocol. In his retirement message, Schofield thanked the developers, friends, family, and fans who supported him throughout his career, while acknowledging that the gaming industry is going through a difficult period right now. Still, his message was ultimately optimistic. He said he believes the future of the industry is bright and encourages the next generation of developers to keep creating and bringing new ideas forward. Whatever you think of every game he worked on, Dead Space alone left a major mark on survival horror. So after 35 years in game development, congratulations to Glen Schofield on his retirement. And finally, Dispatch is officially coming to Xbox on July 29th. Ad Hoc Studios' episodic superhero workplace comedy will release on Xbox Series X, S, and Xbox on PC with the full collection of episodes included. It will also support Xbox Play Anywhere, meaning one purchase through the Microsoft Store gives you access across supported Xbox and PC devices with your progress carrying over. Now, it originally released on PS5 and PC last October before it came to Nintendo Switch earlier this year. This finally brings Dispatch to Xbox players. And this one actually hits at a pretty good time for the channel because I'm currently playing through Dispatch myself. So I'm not going to give you my full thoughts on it just yet, but if you've been waiting for the Xbox version, you won't have to wait much longer. Dispatch arrives on Xbox July 29th. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of This Week in Gaming. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty hanging over the industry right now, but this week also gave us a pretty interesting look at where some of gaming's biggest franchises and platforms could be heading next. Bethesda's finally started talking more openly about its long-term future. Dragon Age is facing some uncomfortable questions, and both Xbox and PlayStation are still figuring out what physical ownership looks like as the industry keeps moving further toward digital distribution. Now let me know what stood out to you the most this week, and which of these stories you think is going to matter the most long term. I've been JMF Awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Gaming.